Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage Mark Levin.
He's from the city and I'm just a small town girl. He goes out and I'm stuck in my own world. For the first time my patience is wearing thin. But I don't know how to get to him. So come and take me home, I'll be waiting alone. I keep slipping, so could you save me now? 'Cause I did it again, baby, I'm just a falling star, so don't you cry.
Good evening, everyone. Well, for those I've not had a chance to meet, my name's John Heubusch. I have the honor of being the executive director of the Ronald Reagan Presidential Foundation and Institute. There's a few who can't hear me, I think, right over here, so maybe you can find a way. Louder! Thank you all for joining us this evening. In honor of our men and women in uniform who defend and protect our freedoms around the world, if you'd please stand and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please be seated. Before we get started, there are some special people I'd like to recognize in the audience this evening, and I'll, of course, start with Mark's lovely wife, Julie. Julie.
Taught very directly what it means to be an American. And we...
I recognize that voice. Mark's mother-in-law, Susie's mom, Julia Strauss. Julia? Well, one of the best governors of California in the history of the state. The reason I say one of, because Ronald Reagan was the other governor, Pete Wilson and his wife, Gail. And last but not least, but I'll finish with the young gentleman right in front by the name of Elton Galaxy, our congressman here at the library for 26 years. Elton and Janice Gallagher. Okay, some of you may know that I am leaving my post here at the Reagan Library at the end of this year. I have enjoyed 12 magnificent years at the Reagan Foundation and as its executive director. And while I have loved every minute in a role honoring President Reagan, especially the time getting to know so many patriots like all of you here tonight, it's time for me to move on and do something else. Now, I report this not because tonight has anything to do with me. It doesn't. Rather, I'm mentioning it because this evening's event then represents the very last time that I have the opportunity to welcome Mark to the Reagan Library. And my friends, welcome he is. Tonight marks Mark's 7th official visit to the library. I say official because he's been here a few other times, those visits a little more quiet, with just his family to pay his respects to President Reagan. How truly wonderful it has been to get to know Mark and his family over the years, from his wife Julie, an incredibly gifted attorney, to his dad, Jack, before he sadly passed away 3 years ago, having been married to Norma Levin for 60 years. I've also gotten to know his talented son, Chase, and his lovely and talented daughter, Lauren, who, besides performing the song that you heard as Mark entered this evening, actually worked for us at the Reagan Foundation when we were celebrating President Reagan's centennial. There's something else that's quite unique about Mark's appearance tonight. I won't go into all the details surrounding the reasons for this, but suffice it to say that it's a good news, bad news story. So do you want the bad news first or the good news first? Yeah, it doesn't matter. I always start with the bad news to get it out of the way. The bad news is that this virus is apparently still with us in the form of one variant or another. At least that's what the federal government and the state of California believes. Which is why all of us here at the library appreciate your patience and perseverance with this mask requirement, and sometimes this evening a little bit of extra space around Mark while he's here. But I should also add that the viruses, these things have a way of getting book publishers very nervous about sending their top authors on national book tours during a pandemic, especially when the author's book is the #1 New York Times best-selling book in the nation. This coming week, it'll be 5 weeks. So, yeah, 6. So you might ask, what's the good news? Well, that's easy. He's sitting right there over here. The good news is that, virus be damned, Mark Levin was not going to let it stop him from leaving the underground command post deep in the bowels of a hidden bunker, somewhere under the brick and steel of a nondescript building. For a few days, and continuing the tradition he started just over 10 years ago. It's the tradition of coming all the way out here, bestseller in hand, to sign it and share it with all of you. As it turns out, because of the pandemic, the Reagan Library is the only place in the United States where Mark is appearing to sign what's become the hottest selling book in the nation. Now, I bet each of you knows someone who brags they did the entire Grateful Dead summer tour in '74, or that they never missed a single concert during the Stones' Voodoo Lounge tour in '94. Now, each of you can say with real authority and a straight face that you did the Mark Levin Marxist American tour of 2021. Congratulations. Actually, in all seriousness, I hope each of you are feeling very special tonight as a result of Mark's commitment to be here with you. I know I am. I know in the news business they call this an exclusive. In Las Vegas, they call it a lady luck. Me, I simply call it a friendship. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the Reagan Library the great one, Mark Levin. Would you like to make an opening statement, Counselor?
I think I would. First of all, you're tremendous patriots. I could not be prouder of you for being here. I could not be prouder of John Heubusch. All these years I've known him in this library. He's made it the gem of presidential libraries. Nothing's even close for my favorite president, Ronald Reagan. And you keep his legacy going. This is crucially important. And people love to come here and they enjoy the experience. And you have been absolutely a faithful and fabulous executive director who has protected and promoted his legacy like nobody else could. So let's have another hand for John. It is a tremendous personal honor for me to be here with the governor and the former First Lady. I lived in this state when he was here, when he was the governor for a short period of time, and he warned the nation and he warned Californians what was coming. And he was right. And he was right. Governor, First Lady, I want to thank you very much for being here. And Congressman, and First Congress, what do we call the wife of a Congress? Janice. Thank you for all you did, too, while you were in Congress and what you've done for this magnificent facility here. There's nothing like it in the entire country. And it's, I understand Obama's building some palace to himself, taking over parkland, upsetting the neighbors, and all the rest of it. But anyway, this is really a fabulous place. And I come here each time, really, in honor of President Reagan, who I worked for 8 years, and his legacy, because this library is run so beautifully, and Joanne and Melissa and the others, and because of you, to be perfectly honest with you, people, we were sitting there 4 or 5 hours. Mark, I can't thank you enough. You have no idea how you inspire your fellow citizens. You are the patriots. You're the ones, it's on your shoulders who are going to save this country or not save this country. And I'm convinced you will.
Take it away. Mark, every time you're here with your newest best-selling book, you and I agree it's the most important for one reason or another. Without exaggeration, again, this really, really does seem to be your most important work, correct?
You know, I write these books. I don't write books about me. You know, my 40 years in politics, nobody cares about my 40 years in politics, my 25 years in broadcasting, nobody cares about my 25 years in broadcasting. I try and figure out what's taking place. I try to amplify on it. I try to dig deeply into it. And what do we have, a steamboat out here? And apparently. Anyway, I started writing this book, I guess it's now 19 months ago. And things changed a lot during the course of the 19 months. Things were happening to the country that in my lifetime really never happened to this country before. Is it me? Apparently it is. I've got a mic here, and one here.
Yeah.
And so I said, what is going on here? What is going on in this country? And I mean, I know you listen to radio, you watch Fox, you watch TV, and people opine on what they think's going on. I said, there's something more going on here. This didn't just happen. It's as if all of a sudden the water broke and everything slammed all at once. They were waiting for George Floyd's situation or something. But the movement was fast. The movement was integrated. The Democrat Party's reaction seemed very passive, if not supportive. And so I dug into this as much as I could. And I looked at each one of these movements. And so the reason I think this is the most important book I've ever written is because of the times. And because whether it's a military operation or a successful political campaign or a successful business, you need to know, we say opponents and adversaries. We don't have opponents and adversaries anymore. We have enemies. Enemies who want to destroy the country, the economic system, the border, and all the rest of it. And they're doing it. So that you need to know who they are, what their backgrounds are, where they come from, where this started, what their ideology is, in order to find their soft spots, in order to find their imperfections, so we can defeat them. So this book is a different book for me. It's a mix. It's 7 chapters. The first 6 chapters are fairly scholarly. You can get through it because you're smart people. Our opponents aren't smart people. You're smart people. They're devious people, and they're good at being devious, but we need to apply our smarts so we can figure out what our strategies and tactics are going to be, or we'll be flailing around aimlessly. And that's the last chapter of the book. So the first 6 chapters, I take on climate change. They finally settled on a phrase for what is the degrowth movement. What grew out of Europe is the degrowth movement in the 1970s. That's what you're experiencing. That's why they go after fossil fuels. That's why they're driving up the cost of gasoline. This state's like none. The price is ridiculous. But they're driving it up across the country. That's why these phony infrastructure bills, they're going to pour a fortune into these wasteful mass transit projects and punish people who drive, because it is a degrowth movement. It's not about the air. It's not about the water. It is an attack on the capitalist system. It's the centralization of control over the capitalist system, overwhelming businessmen and... Can you hear me? It's all right. Eat it? Can you hear that? All right. I do an act in Las Vegas, too, by the way. It's an attack on various aspects of our economics. They never talk about success, ever. If you're successful, you obviously aren't paying enough taxes. If you're successful, you're obviously racist. If you're successful, you obviously didn't build that by yourself. The government built it with you and for you, and all the rest that they come for. And these are people who are not successful, who haven't worked a day in their lives in the private sector. Biden, this is me, not the Reagan Library. Biden, Harris, Schumer, and Pelosi, they haven't worked 1 minute in the private sector, ever. But they know how to run everything. So what I'm saying is, I'm just pulling a little piece of this out because there's a lot of subject matter in there. Climate change. Okay, so the temperature change is 1 degree. Honest to God, what are we going to do about it? We're going to destroy our economic system while the communist Chinese are massively increasing their power? They laugh at us. They think we're foolish because we are. The same people who hate America and capitalism, the same people who defend Hamas and Cuba and communist China, they're people who support this movement. It's not an environmental movement. So I try to explain in the book as an example where this comes from. You talk to the average person, you're a climate denier. Anyone here deny there's climate? The phrases they use, they're so buffoonish. No, I don't deny there's a climate, and phrases like that. So what I do, John, is I try and take each one of these areas and I try and point out, where were these founded? How did life get breathed into these different movements and so forth? So if we understand it better, we can debate it better, we can argue it better, and even better than that, we can confront it better.
Yeah. Mark, there's a gentleman, I think, that saw this coming. And I want to get your reaction to this video. I have to apologize because I edited it to pull a number of the phrases together at once, but it's all from one particular speech, if you could run it. Maybe you won't be running it. Here we go. Sound.
I think the Nixon Library has infiltrated the Reagan Library.
History. Those of us who are over 35 or so years of age grew up in a different America. We were taught very directly what it means to be an American. And we absorbed almost in the air a love of country and an appreciation of its institutions. Or you could get a sense of patriotism from school. And if all else failed, you could get a sense of patriotism from the popular culture. We've got to do a better job of getting across that America is freedom. Freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of enterprise, and freedom is special and rare. It's fragile. It needs production. If we forget what we did, we won't know who we are. I'm warning of an eradication of the American memory that could result ultimately in an erosion of the American spirit. Let's start with some basics. More attention to American history and a greater emphasis on civic ritual. And informed patriotism.
Very pressing, Tom.
It's unbelievable. I mean, if you're teaching children to hate their country, you're not going to have a country in one generation. If you're teaching your children that this is an accidental country or racist country or an illegitimate country, and that's what they're being taught in so many institutions now, you're not going to have a country, let alone a military to defend it. And he was so right, because he read history. He read philosophy, Ronald Reagan. He knew a tremendous amount about mankind, the ancients, about Western Enlightenment, and so forth. In fact, as you know, his library was filled with history books and philosophy books and so forth at home, his library, that he read. And of course, the media attacked him like they attack every Republican president. They don't know anything. You know, only Biden knows everything. So, but this is very, very important. Very, very important. This is the battle we have. We are subsidizing our own demise. The teachers' unions are destroying our country. The teachers' unions. What's the first thing this administration did? He signs a bunch of executive orders, goes after the Keystone XL pipeline. It's like, what? We were energy independent 8 months ago. Now he's begging OPEC for oil. I mean, think about this. Why would you, as everybody says, kill our pipeline and then help Russia with its pipeline? Something's wrong with that. But that said, we are subsidizing colleges and universities who hire Marxist professors and give them tenure. And I looked into this with another book I wrote, Plunder and Deceit. How are these professors hired? They're hired by the same faculty and deans that are already there. So it's an incestuous relationship. And 70 or so % of them are hired from the same Ivy League schools. So they produce these people, they give them tenure very, very quickly. And so we pay hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars as a nation to subsidize colleges and universities, and even more than that to subsidize our public schools. And we have absolutely no say in who's hired, how they get tenure, on the textbooks, on how they're trained, on what their seminars are. And not to jump, but in chapter 7, I say, it's time to attack that, and attack it hard. It's time that they're on their heels and we're on our toes. It's time that they have to answer questions. This is a long process. It's not going to happen in 2 minutes. People say, what can we do? What can we do? Okay, the question is, what can I do? What can you do? Now, what can we do? It's what are each one of you going to do? And that's the point of the last chapter. And you've heard me say this on radio and TV. I'll give you a slight example. Public schools. Even the local teachers' unions, the state affiliates, and the national, let's just take the NEA. They all have to file tax returns. They all have a tax status that is granted to them by the Internal Revenue Service based on representations that they make to the Internal Revenue Service. They're not taxed, so they don't pay an income tax. So they have to go through certain things and do certain things in order to have that status. I'm not going to get into the weeds on everything. So what I used to do when I was president of Landmark Legal Foundation is I would file IRS complaints against the NEA, relentlessly. And when the general counsel of the NEA retired, I forget the guy's name, Bob, whatever, it doesn't matter. He attacked us. He said that group, Landmark Legal Foundation, because what happened? The IRS started auditing them and auditing them and auditing them. This is what the American Marxists do to us. You have got to begin to become litigious. You've got to begin to become aggressive in the use of the administrative state. You've got to become aggressive in the use of the Freedom of Information Act, in filings with the Internal Revenue Service, and in the end of the book, I tell you how to do it, and I give you links. Can you imagine if critical race theory is a Marxist ideology, but it's political. There's no reason in a school district why 100 or 1,000 parents and taxpayers can't individually start filing complaints against their local union. Even the IRS tells you how to file complaints with the IRS. Again, there are links in there. There's no reason you don't file constantly Freedom of Information Act requests. We have a very liberal Freedom of Information Act request law in this state, as most states do. You want to know what's in the teacher's contract. You want to know if the union representative in your school has a cell phone or an iPhone that's been given to them by the school district. I'm getting into the weeds here, but I'm telling you we're going to have to. Or a computer that's been given to them by the school district. That's government property. Go after it. Find out what they're saying. Find out what they're doing. File FOIA requests. You want to know how teachers are hired. You want to know how teachers are promoted. You want to know about the teacher's contract I mentioned. You want to know about their seminars. You want to know about their training courses. Just overwhelm them. You see what's going down on the border? That's called Cloward and Piven. Overwhelm the system, break the system, take over the system, and then blame the people who used to run the system. That's what's coming out of the White House today. Well, guess what? One of the things I say in the book is, do that to them. You're in a school district, you're going to have a lot of ideas in this book on what you can do with that school district. I was on a school board. When I was in law school, I got elected to the school board. Most of the votes were 8 to 1, but you know, that's the way it goes. Anyway, so every now and then there was 7 to 2. But I saw immediately, you elected a lot of these Republicans to the school board, they just jumped. Because it's a lot easier. Fighting with the local union or fighting with the educational bureaucracy is a major pain. So you can pretend you're doing something, work it out with them. I think McConnell calls it bipartisanship. You can be bipartisan, something like that, all right. Or you can fight them. You want the union to fear you. You go in front of those school boards. I'm from Loudoun County. Have you ever heard of Loudoun County, Virginia? That's my county, for God's sakes. It's the wealthiest county in America. And they figure if they can take down that county, they can take down any county. And those parents, they're rising up. The taxpayers are rising up. So the school board, like any other autocracy, is tightening and tightening. Only 20 people allowed in the auditorium at a time. 1 minute you get. Then your microphone's shut off. They have no intention of listening to anybody. Okay. Well, punish them and file hundreds of FOIA requests that they have to deal with. Overwhelm them with it. File complaints against the teachers' unions. Overwhelm them with it. We need to get smart about what we're doing rather than begging them for help, begging your school board. I hear, let's win elections. I'm not opposed to that. But how come when we win elections, we don't get very far, and they win elections and they change the world? Okay, I'm not opposed to winning elections. This is in addition to winning elections. We also have a number of these school board members who on recall petitions. But they don't care. They're bomb throwers. So they're going to do everything they can until the moment that vote's taken. So again, there's much more on this. This is just a little piece of it. It's the same thing with cops. Our cops are under attack. I think that's quite obvious now. How do we help them? Other than putting a sign out, support the blue line, what do we do? I'll tell you what we can do, and I explain this in the book. There are a number of police associations and unions. I'm not saying just give them money. I'm saying contact them and raise money for legal representation for cops. Now, hold on. To do what? They can bring civil actions against people who physically attack them. You're not going to get these prosecutors like the nut job in San Francisco, the nut job in Los Angeles. They're not going to do anything. What did Reagan do to the Soviet Union? This is what he bankrupted them. If a police officer can find out the individual who attacked them, assaulted them, doesn't matter what the district attorney wants to do, sue them. And if they're part of Black Lives Matter, sue them. Bankrupt them. And I list all the potential civil, every state's different, but all the potential civil claims a police officer would have. So you can call the local union, police union or whatever, and say, all right, look, we're going to raise some money, but we want the money to go to a lawyer to help a police officer who's been attacked. And so they can. And I look at Black Lives Matter, they walk around with uniforms. It's not really hard to tell if Black Lives Matter is looting, burning, whatever they're doing, or Antifa for that matter. So you bring enough lawsuits, you try and bankrupt these organizations, you try to punish the individuals who are attacking cops. This is something that's not typically done. If we did this on a nationwide scale in city after city after city, can you imagine their legal expenses? Can you imagine how many courtrooms that we would be in? It's called going on offense. Go on offense. Go on offense. You want to hear more? You want to hear more of this? Colleges and universities I started with. Why are we pouring so much money into colleges and universities? Why don't we just try and slash their budgets? Now, you can't do that depending on the politics of a given state. But if you have a Republican House and Senate and a Republican governor, what are they waiting for? 34% of the people in this country have graduated from a 4-degree college or higher. That means the rest have not. We're all subsidizing these universities and colleges, paying a fortune. We have no say. The state legislatures, particularly in Republican states, need to become much more active, and they need to become much more involved in oversight. They can address the issue of tenure and contracts and so forth and so on, and they have the power of the purse, and the power of the purse should be used. But again, there's other things we can remember what I said? We have to become more litigious like them. We have to use the administrative state. We've got to do these other things that, we don't want to do. National Review doesn't tell us really to do this sort of thing. Instead, we pass white papers to each other on the stuff that we can think about doing. I got 6 chapters of white papers in here. And then a final chapter that says, okay, bring out the brass knuckles. Now what are we going to do about this? And that's the key. What are each of you going to do about that? And by the way, my ideas are not you may have 1,000 better ideas. I'm not opposed to it. But there's no reason state legislatures can't slash money from colleges and universities. There's no reason they can't get involved in how tenure is provided. There's no reason they can't get involved in the course load. Academic freedom, they say. We don't have academic freedom. They used to talk about academic freedom. We don't have academic freedom. Any conservative professors to keep his mouth shut. How many graduation ceremonies actually have a conservative speaker? I mean, if I were to go on a college campus and dare to speak, they'd come out, like the feudal days with the clubs and the pitchforks and everything else. We're not required to subsidize this, and yet we go along like we are, step after step. When Ronald Reagan was was governor of this state, one of the biggest problems he had right away in the 1960s was the rioting on the university campuses, which he put down, which is what I was hoping we would do in the cities of America this summer, by the way, put them down. But that's what he did. These Weather Underground, remember the 1960s, or most of us are old enough to remember those, when they were rioting and violent and all the rest and so forth and so on, again, coming out of the colleges and universities. How many of you have kids who you've taught them morality, faith, conservatism, and then at Thanksgiving, it's like, where the hell did you come from? A lot of you, right? Or you know people who have? That's because you send them through these indoctrination mills. Why do you think Bernie Sanders wants free college? Why do you think they want to wipe out all the debt of people who've gone through college? This is their indoctrination mill. That's why they have almost complete control of most universities and colleges, with the exception of maybe a half a dozen in the country. That is a disaster. And again, you can use the power of FOIA to get all kinds of information and litigation. If you send your kid to college and you're paying the tuition, as an example, and they go into a class and they're not learning what they're supposed to learn based on what the class description is, instead they're getting all this pablum, you call that university and tell them you want your money back. And if they won't give them your money back, you hired one of the legal groups I have in the book, and you sue their asses. That's what you do. This is down and dirty. It's the only way we can claw our ways back. There are tens of millions of us who look around and say, oh my God, what's happening to our country? That's not enough. Or I vote every time. That's not enough. These people wake up in the morning, early in the morning, go to bed late at night trying to figure out how to destroy what you love. We think you call into my show, I told Mark, and then we have dinner and it's done. It's not done. They're not stopping, and they're not going to stop. I'll give you one more example, then you can get your third question up. Corporations. Too many corporations don't believe in capitalism. Too many corporations don't believe in competition. Too many corporations get in bed with the federal government or state government, or they'll go to communist China. They figure they can make a quick buck, that sort of thing. I call them corporatists. I don't call them capitalists. Now, here's the thing. How many of you have ever attended a shareholder meeting? governor. I expect the governor to be, yeah. I see, what, 12 hands? How many people are in here, 1,000? We need to attend shareholder meetings. They attend them by the hundreds and the hundreds, and they influence even not just board decisions, but the selection of board members. And you have hedge funds that are massive. One of them is worth like $9 trillion, and this guy has a lot of influence, and he's a radical leftist, believe it or not. And he just changed the board membership, 3 members on ExxonMobil. And they appointed 3, what I call American Marxists, to the board who are anti-energy. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we got to go to board meetings and make a stink too. How many of you have 401ks? How many of you have IRAs? How many of you have money in a mutual fund? Okay, we'll take a look at it, see what companies are involved. You own stock in those companies. When they have a public shareholder meeting, maybe you collect a few people in your neighborhood, maybe you get online, you can use the internet too. Go to the shareholder meeting and say, your job's to make profit, not to destroy this country and throw in with this party or do that or the other. We need activists attending shareholder meetings. And we have more money than the American Marxists. Believe it or not, we do. There's tens of millions of us. Well, we need to be very selective in what we support. Ben & Jerry's. I'm lactose intolerant, so it doesn't affect me. But Ben & Jerry's is a perfect example, and Goya is another example. Goya was under attack. And the people who founded Goya are the nicest people in the world. And he dared to make a statement supporting President Trump, and they went after him. And all of you and the rest of the nation said, oh, no, you don't. I don't even eat this stuff, and I'm buying it off the shelves. And they had a fantastic quarter. Why aren't we, I say we ought to use the BDS movement, which is an anti-Semitic, anti-Israel movement. Boycott, divest, sanction. Okay, why don't we boycott, divest, and sanction them? Why don't we ever do that? That's how you get the attention of a corporation. So we need to do this. So you'll say, Mark, who's going to do this? You're going to do it. Because one of the other things I suggest in the book is that in every neighborhood or community in the country, you form what I call community committees or patriotic committees, where people talk to each other, where people said, did you hear what's going on the school board? Do you hear what's going on with this? Do you hear what's going on? Let's do this. I assign you to that. Political parties have done this for what? Long, long time. They have precinct captains, they have this, that, they have the other. I'm saying you need to communicate, you need to build a network. They're banning us, or a lot of us. I resigned, so it doesn't matter to me. Facebook and Twitter, they're banning you? Okay. How many of you have email? How many of you can text? The hell with them. Communicate with people in your community, build the lists, and start to do stuff, including boycotting, divesting, and sanctioning. And my suggestion is we have about 13,000 school districts in this country. Can you imagine if we had even small numbers of committees in the 13,000 school districts communicating with each other? Even if we had 50% of them. All right, what are you doing on this? What are you doing on this? All right, this company, we're going to target that company. We're going to target this. Folks, I've been writing books about liberty for a long time. I've been talking about it a long time. It's time to act right now. And you don't have to answer to anybody. You can just take charge and start doing things. When I walk our dog in our neighborhood, I have people come up to me and say, Mark, what are we going to do? I say, no, what are you prepared to do? I'll give you plenty of ideas. What are you going to do? What time are you going to take? And more people are doing things. doing things, organizing, going to the school board meetings, you don't have to have a kid in the school system to go to the school board meeting to defend this country. You don't have to have a kid in college to fight that battle and in order to address what's happening in colleges and universities. That's why the first 6 chapters are important. We need to know who the enemy is. We need to know what their tactics are. We need to know what they're doing so we can figure out how to counter it. And this isn't going to all happen at once, but you're an army of patriots, and there's a lot of things you can do. There's a lot of things you can do with your iPhone or Android. There's a lot of things that you can do with a few bucks here and there. There's a lot of things you can do in your community here and there. They don't hear from us. That's why they roll us. The other side is organized. I mean, they got so many groups. I never heard of all this stuff that they organize around. And that's fine, but we should organize around the basics. So there's not going to be some great messiah who's going to do it. The Republican Party is not going to do it. You have to do it. We had the Reagan Revolution. Ronald Reagan was never supported by the Republican establishment. Governor, am I right? He was not. He had to fight 3 times to get the nomination. They fought him tooth and nail. But he was the happy warrior, and he went on, and he fought tooth and nail, and he became such a magnificent president of the United States. That's why you're here. You should learn from President Reagan. He never gave up, and he destroyed the Soviet Union. The economy grew like never before in its history, and on and on and on, the things that he was able to do. You know, they want to turn us against each other, critical race theory, and we are red-blooded Americans. And I say in the book, I don't really give a darn if you're a Democrat or Republican, if you're a libertarian, if you're whatever you are. Do you love the country? Okay. That's what we organize around, because the other side hates the country. And it's like critical race theory. They've been organized, they've been working at this. Critical race theory started in the 70s. It got big in our law schools. It moved into our colleges and universities. It's now moved into our elementary schools. It is a Marxist ideology that comes from a guy named Herbert Marcuse, who was part of the Frankfurt School in Berlin. He leaves for his life out of Berlin because the communists were fighting the Nazis, and the communists lost for control of Germany. So he escapes and he comes to the United States. And we welcome him with open arms. And what does he do? He organizes to destroy the United States because he's a Marxist. Like some of the squad may come to mind. So anyway, comes to the United States and starts writing one of the books he wrote, One-Dimensional Man, becomes a big deal with some of these college students who are really half-wits. They're pretty stupid, actually, but he becomes a popular figure. Many of them here in this state, as a matter of fact. Bill Ayers becomes a follower. Bernardine Dohrn becomes a follower. You had a number of camps that they had in California that was set up in California to indoctrinate kids and so forth. And so it was horrific. And when I came into the Reagan administration, I was a young pup. I was 22, 23 years old. I go to this agency called the Action Agency. What's the Action Agency? Well, it's the umbrella agency for Vista and the Peace Corps and everything. They bought thousands, tens of thousands of rules for radicals, Alinsky's book, and they were handing it out through Vista throughout the cities of America to indoctrinate as many people as they possibly could. It's really quite shocking. Anyway, so this guy Marcuse, he develops what's called critical theory. And critical theory is, in a thumbnail sketch, it's the ideology that the law is made to advance and preserve what the dominant culture wants. So if you're a minority, either a physical minority or minority in thought or so forth, the law cannot be just. So the nation is unjust from the word go. The nation exists to preserve the nation. Can you imagine such a thing? So what they argued there and what they said is the laws are unjust, they're unequal, our prisons are too crowded, prosecutors are too powerful, cops ought to have their power pulled back and everything, because the law is unjust, because the people who are dominant in the country are the ones who made the laws and are enforcing the laws. Okay. So what happens? In the 70s, and by the way, the New Left movement embraced all of that, wrote a long document based on what Marcuse had said about overthrowing the country and so on. They were very violent. One of them became Barack Obama's dear friend, Bill Ayers, you may recall. But anyway, so in the 70s, there was a fellow by the name of Derek Bell. And he'd been a professor at Stanford, law professor. Then he became a law professor at Harvard. And he got the idea, I can do something else with this. It's not just the dominant society, it's the white dominant society. So he introduces race into this Marxist, ideology. And all of these are customized to America. The book's not called Marxism, it's called American Marxism. So it's not like the old Communist Party USA, or you give allegiance to the old Soviet Union. No. This is a tailored version of Marxism. I never knew this. I had to look into this stuff. The reason the book is as long as it is, because I quote them. Because people are, Mark, you might read what they say. Read what they're doing. There's 400 endnotes in this book. So he decides that the society can never be just, the culture can never be just, because it's a white supremacist, white-dominated culture. So this is beginning to spread in the law schools. It's beginning to spread in the doctorate programs, and then at the other graduate schools, and now, as you can see, it's leached into our society and into our schools. And the funny thing about Bell is he didn't like Martin Luther King. He didn't like the Civil Rights Act of 64 or 65. He didn't like these Supreme Court decisions that came down, because just like Karl Marx, he viewed these as nothing more than the white supremacist, white dominant culture trying to do things that seemed significant, but really weren't. And the only way to end this is to overthrow the society. Marx despised socialists, because he said socialists were halfway measure. And socialists prevented or slowed down the ultimate communist revolution. So he said the socialists were the real enemy. So that is why critical race theory does not believe in a colorblind society. They never, ever talk about a colorblind society, because they want oppressor versus oppressed, victim versus victimized, the bourgeoisie versus the proletariat. And one other point on this. And why is America hated so much? Because it's so unlike Marxism. But one other reason. Marx really hated America. And he used to write for the New York Sun, by the way. He spent 12 years writing for the journalist. Who knew? Anyway, so because the Industrial Revolution, according to Marxism, according to Marx, you should have had the rising up of the proletariat, the masses, against the industrialists. Instead, you had the creation of the biggest middle class in human history, who loved their country and would go to war to fight for their country. So Marxism was wrong about everything. And this is why Marx was furious with the success of the United States. This is too cerebral, all this, isn't it? Is this okay? And then, and by the way, the so-called progressive movement grew out of this. I wrote about it in a different book. But the so-called, I think it was my 4th visit here. I'm kidding, I don't remember. But it grew out, the progressive movement, self-named, grew out of the Marxist movement. When you read the original, the old intellectuals, progressives, they trashed the Declaration of Independence. They trashed the Constitution. They say the Constitution, when you hear living and breathing, that comes from them. Because the reason they want a living and breathing document is because, as Scalia said, the Constitution isn't a living and breathing document. It's dead when it comes to stating the law. That's it. You can't breathe life into your own ideology and then push it into the Constitution of the United States. That's what it is. How many of you have a living and breathing mortgage? I mean, it's so ridiculous. So anyway, they didn't like the Constitution because the firewalls that are in the Constitution to prevent these progressives, these Marxists, from doing what they want to do. They didn't like the Declaration of Independence. They all attacked it. Marx attacks it in the Communist Manifesto. But they all attacked it. Woodrow Wilson attacked it. John Dewey attacked it. They all attacked it. Why? Because the Declaration of Independence is based on, really, the Enlightenment and Judeo-Christian values. Well, they're atheists, for the most part, and they reject the Enlightenment because they reject history. Marx talked about destroy history, destroy all history. The world begins today with a clean slate. That's why they were pulling down monuments. That's why they're effectively burning books. That's why they're silencing free speech. These are all the things that Marxists, American Marxists, do. That's why big tech is doing what it does on behalf of the Democrat Party and so forth. So the progressive has always hated the Constitution, and they've always hated the Declaration of Independence. As a matter of fact, I'll tell you a quick side story. Woodrow Wilson went to Philadelphia, to Independence Hall on July 4th one year, and he gave a speech about the second half of the Declaration, how important it was, when the colonists listed all their issues with the Crown. He said the first part doesn't matter. It's the second part when they list a whole bunch of grievances they have. He said that's the part we should focus on. So Coolidge is president some time later, and he goes to the same spot, and he gives a speech, and he says, no, it's the first part of the Declaration of Independence that you should pay attention to, about, our Creator, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness and all that. Natural law, natural rights. He said, that's the part that matters the most. The reason they listed the grievances was so the whole world knew why the colonists were going to fight for their liberty. And so that's very, very important to understand. That's also why Obama never read the entire Declaration. He left out the part about the Creator and so forth, because they don't believe in the founding documents. And this came to the fore about 2 years ago with the 1619 Project in the New York Times. They do not want you to believe that 1776 is the founding. So they want to change the history. Well, anyway, they want to destroy the history, which is one of the reasons I'm on a big bugaboo with the New York Times. This is why I constantly talk about the history of the New York Times. And then I'll let you get your third question in. I am rambling, I'm sorry. I'm like a Marxist professor in a college classroom here. But there's a reason you hate the press. They deserve to be hated. The New York Times in 1932, as you know, whoever listened to my show, the New York Times in 1932 had a bureau chief in Moscow by the name of Walter Duranty. He was on Stalin's payroll. Stalin gave him girlfriends, gave him one of those limousines that all look alike, and a driver. Stalin gave him the best food, and Stalin also gave him his stories. So he'd write these stories, always favorable to Stalin. Even at the point of where Stalin decided when it came to the Ukraine, he couldn't kill enough peasants. He said, these peasants will not accept this whole commune idea. And they were killing them. But he said, we can't kill them fast enough. So what he did is he basically surrounded Ukraine and starved them to death. And there were millions of deaths. And Solzhenitsyn writes about hearing them claw at the gates of the Gulag to try and get in. There was cannibalism. This went on for about 14, 15 months. It was horrific. And the New York Times printed one story after another where the American people had no idea what was going on. And then at some point they learned about it, and Walter Duranty said they had had a bad harvest that year. And he also Walter Duranty when they started talking about Stalin. That phrase about sometimes you have to break a few eggs to make an omelet, that's Walter Duranty. The New York Times senior editors knew what Walter Duranty was doing because there were other newspapers that were saying, do you understand what your guy's doing here? He got a Pulitzer Prize, Walter Duranty, and the New York Times and the Duranty family will not return it. That was 1932. During the Holocaust, the bureau chief for the New York Times in Berlin, this guy was sympathetic to the Third Reich. And so he was not reporting on the efforts of Hitler to wipe out the European Jews. And the management of the New York Times, the Sulzberger family, they were covering up what was going on in the Holocaust. I mean, Hitler wasn't exactly keeping it secret, you know, and a number of European newspapers were writing about it, but the New York Times was not. There have been 3 professors who've written about this, big, thick books about it. Nobody talks about it but me pushing it, so everybody understands what a lousy, diabolical corporation the New York Times is. So they covered up the Holocaust pretty much till 1944. It's one of the reasons General Eisenhower, when they were liberating the death camps, particularly Auschwitz, he called the media, he said, come with me and bring your cameras. And he went into Auschwitz. And he said, I want you to look around you. It was so bad, Omar Bradley was throwing up. These men had seen everything. The stench was horrific. The bodies, the kids, everything, it was horrific. They saw the bones piled up all over the place. And the New York Times had never reported on it. And then thirdly, the New York Times with a reporter by the name of Herbert Matthews. In 1959, he does an interview of Castro. Castro was down to about 18 guerrillas. He was hiding out in the mountains. They didn't have any food to eat. The Batista regime, which was a military dictatorship, had him on the run. He writes this glowing piece about Castro because Castro tells him we have thousands and thousands of guerrillas. We got young people throughout the so forth and so on. So people in Cuba hear about this because it's pushed by Castro. They begin to join Castro. Castro puts out all this information about how he's leading a democratic revolution. The New York Times is pushing him, pushing him, and pushing him. Of course, he had nothing. Well, ultimately, he wins this revolution, and then he announces, I'm a communist. And then they quickly start, Che Guevara in particular, quickly start executing people who had even fought with them thinking he was a Democrat. They start executing, slaughtering them as fast as they can. That's the New York Times. Friend of Stalin, friend of Hitler, friend of Castro. And I've said on the air many times, if the New York Times wants to provide me with any one of their people to discuss this, I'm more than happy to do it. That's number 1 on the New York Times bestsellers list. I don't know where the hell you wanted to take this, but go ahead.
No, Mark,
That use up all my time? Dinner time.
Yeah, it is. I've got 30 questions. I bet you they have 100. But yeah, everyone here, I think, is having dinner with us this evening, and along with you, Mark. And so we'll head to dinner next. But before we do, every time Mark visits, we try to think of some parting gift to have him leave with. And this time, I thought, I'll just pull it out here, Mark, so people can see it. Ronald Reagan, he had beautiful things in the Oval Office in the White House. And what he liked most were eagles, for obvious reasons, and the freedom they represented. And so we thought we would give you an eagle that's really quite similar to one the president had in the Oval Office. This one is special. This one is special because it has in its talons, it has in its talons a little actual piece of the Berlin Wall. So. And the plaque mark reads, in honor of Mark Levin's appearance with his #1 best-selling book, American Marxism, at the Ronald Reagan Presidential Library, August 14th, 2021. Thank you, Mark.
Let me apologize in advance for that long diatribe. I apologize for that. But let me underscore something. You're a national treasure. What you've done with this library, what you've done for history, we're going to be best friends no matter what. But I'm going to miss you here at the library.
I miss you too, Mark.
And I just want to thank all of you people here. I hope when you go home, whether you're eating dinner or not, I hope you'll be inspired. I hope you'll be invigorated. It's very daunting. It's very complex, but we need your help. How many of you in here are police officers or former police officers? Stand up. Stand up. Stay. Stay. Don't sit down. How many of you are in the military or who served? Stand up, stay up. How many of you served in the military? And how many of you are going to now take steps to save this country? Stand up. I think Ronald Reagan would be thrilled to see all you patriots here today and know that you are going to fight for your country. God bless you, Governor, Congressman. Thank you all. John, God bless you, man.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us this evening. Please stay seated as Mark Levin and his guests and our VIP exit the building. Thank you again for joining us, and we'll see you soon.